And welcome back to the Financially Simple Podcast. Today we're going to continue our deep dive into the area of risk management. Now we're dealing with personal finances for us business owners. I'm covering this interesting topic today. It's one that you may think you know all the ins and outs on, but surprisingly in my world dealing with hundreds of business owners nationally, this little area can often lead to some misunderstandings. So I want to cover in today's topics the key points to know about your homeowner's insurance policy. Yeah, I know this is probably not the sexiest topic we're going to talk about. Everybody wants to get to taxes, which I know, or they want to deal with investing, which are often a lot of fun and conversations around, but we've got to deal with this homeowner's insurance. The reason for it is oftentimes when I take a gander at the way that our clients, when they first come to us, insure their properties, they carry more risk than they may know because of the way the policy was written or not written. So I want to deal with some key points you need to know about your homeowner's insurance policy. The first one is let's deal with what is a homeowner's insurance policy. You're like, Justin, duh, I know what it is. It fixes my house. Yeah, it does. It fixes your private residence and it'll compensate you for a loss. So if your home is burglarized, if there's a disaster like a windstorm, we've had tornadoes come through, your homeowner's insurance policy will fix it. They'll repair it. They'll replace your belongings, or maybe even help you rebuild your house or the property around you. So if we know what it is, then why is it important? Well, as I mentioned, it helps you rebuild your life. So that's the biggest key. The other thing is it's important because if you have a mortgage, as I've talked about a while back, that I really believe every business owner should have a very large, long mortgage. If you have a mortgage, then your mortgage company is probably going to require it. More than likely, they will require homeowners coverage. But perhaps the biggest thing with homeowners insurance is it gives you a liability coverage, which is pretty important. So if something happens to a visitor on your property, something that could cause medical issues, then your homeowner's policy will cover. While years ago, I had a friend of mine, it wasn't a client, but a friend of mine who had somebody slip and fall going up the steps in the wintertime, hit a little piece of ice, and they ended up causing some major health issues. Well, of course, their friend was trying to figure out how to cover it, and they sued the homeowner, and the insurance came in and covered the medical expenses. It's just the way the insurance worked. Now, they weren't aggravated. It wasn't anything that was malicious. It was understood this is what needed to be done. So it's there as a liability protection for you. So if we know why we need to have it or why it's important to have, then let's deal with what does it cover? You say, duh, my house. Well, yeah, it covers your house, but it also covers exterior structures. Years ago, I had a personal, like a shed garage I could park over my truck, and we had a windstorm that hit a particular piece of a house that we owned, and it blew the shed system away. It actually wrapped it around a tree. It was like an aluminum style shed, and the insurance company covered that particular idea. Now, property damage could often be excluded in certain cases. So like if there's a hurricane, you may have to have a special type of rider or a special type of policy to cover that, or flooding or vandalism. Those are things that you may need to check on. In the coast there, hurricanes and vandalisms may be popular. Like my mom and dad's policy on the coast in Georgia, their standard policy covered hurricanes and vandalism, but it didn't cover earthquakes or floods. Here in Tennessee, we have these things with sinkholes. There are some policies which don't standardize or cover sinkholes. So you need to check and see the actual damage that your policy does cover. Another thing that it covers is the loss of a property. So if someone steals something from you, personal property, or something of that nature, then the policy will actually cover. Years ago, we came back, I think it was like 2006, 7. I had just come back on Christmas Eve from a hunting club in Georgia. We had got all of our stuff off the hunting club as far as tree stands, tents. I mean, everything we used for hunting was on there except for guns and bow and arrows. Four-wheeler was on there. I mean, it was a pretty packed trailer that I had everything stacked on. And I disconnected the trailer. We had a double garage system. I pulled my truck around to the other side of the house where the other garage was. And on Christmas night, or Christmas Eve night, somebody stole the trailer. Yeah, it made me mad. They took my four-wheeler. They took my trailer. They took everything. It ended up being almost a $30,000 claim of all the hunting gear. And the homeowner's insurance covered that because it was part of theft or damage. We actually had one time where a windstorm came through and blew off the front shingles of our house. The homeowner's insurance covered that because it was a property loss issue. It's because of a damage issue. Another thing that it'll cover is personal liability. So if you, your family member, or maybe even your pet causes an accident, injures somebody, or does property damage, your homeowner's insurance can protect you. Years ago, I had a client of mine who's had a nice little sweet lab, but this Labrador dog did not like the delivery person. It wasn't a formal delivery person like for the post office, whatever, but it was a business delivery person. And the dog bit and actually did really big damage to the guy's calf. Had some medical issues. The homeowner's insurance policy covered the damage that the dog required. So now there could be some exclusions. One of the funniest exclusions I've seen when it comes to property liability is if you have a ticked off neighbor, they actually called it an aggressive act. An aggressive act against a neighbor. If you have a ticked off neighbor or you do something to a neighbor out of revenge, it may not cover that. If you get ticked at your neighbor and you shoot a rock through their house, it's not going to cover it. You're going to be liable for it. The other thing it's going to do is if you lose your house for any reason, you can't live in it, it'll actually pay for alternative living arrangement while your house is being repaired or rebuilt. It's called an additional living cost coverage. So those are pretty standard coverages. Now, there's some variations depending on what part of the country you're in, but that's pretty standard. Something that's not standard are some additional riders. And this is where I see people get in trouble. I have clients who will have jewelry collections or fur collections. They may have art or antiques. I have a lot of clients who have coin collections, rare coin collections or stamps or firearms, musical instruments, cameras, expensive jewelry, expensive jewelry. There's a lot of things that you actually need to have a rider for, and they call it a scheduled coverage. So we actually have a scheduled coverage on my wife's rings. She has some rings we bought her. It's just an engagement ring, but they're more than my standard policy limits. The standard policy limits only cover, I think it was $1,000 or $2,000. It wasn't much. And so we wanted to get her rings insured, so we had them appraised. We gave the appraisal to the insurance company, and we actually made a schedule to protect her jewelry where something happened. Maybe she lost it. Maybe it fell off her hand. Maybe she was doing something at a house somewhere, and the ring fell off and washed down the drain. So that's a broad coverage. In firearms, for example, I have a lot of clients who like to use firearms for whatever reason or another. And firearms actually many times will have a limit. They may say, oh, you only cover $1,000 of firearms or $2,000 of firearms. That's not a lot of coverage for guns. And so you can actually schedule your firearms with the insurance company, or if they're ever stolen or they're destroyed in a house fire, then you can get those taken care of. And the cool thing about a rider and scheduled property is oftentimes there's not a deductible. So if you lose the ring, tell them that you lost the ring, and they'll replace the ring for you. So then we get to the question of how much homeowners insurance do I need? How much homeowners insurance do I need? And this is where I see an issue many times. Many times we insure the house, and if you're in a market like we were back in 07, 08, or 09, or like we're seeing now in certain parts of the world, like for example, Franklin, Tennessee, or Nashville, Tennessee is just booming right now, and house prices are just unbelievably accelerating. If you bought a house for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and now it's worth $600,000, and you haven't checked to make sure your coverages are up to date, you may be underinsured. And this is one of the areas that I have our team check with clients, is to make sure they're not underinsured. And as that policy limit climbs, you may need to change the company, because as your limits climb, as your coverage increases, there may be other companies which are more competitive in your particular marketplace or your particular house demographics. So how much insurance coverage do you need? Obviously, you need to cover the structure of the home. I'm pretty confident that I believe you should have replacement value. This is how much it would cost to replace your house from scratch. Whenever I built our house, we spent a couple $100,000, $300,000 building it, and it came to be appraised for much greater than what we spent building the house because of the sweat equity that I had and some decisions we made. And so we had to insure the house for significantly more than what I paid to build the house. Because if my house were to burn down or get blown off the mountaintop, then honestly, I am not going to build a house again. I don't have time. I'm going to hire a good contractor, many of whom I know, and I'm going to say, guys, fix my house. And they're going to come out, and it's going to cost more because I got to pay a contractor. So you want to make sure that you have a replacement value coverage, a structure in your home. The other thing that you want to make sure on your needs is that you're covering your personal property, your personal belongings. So your personal belongings is everything that fits inside the house. Everything that fits inside the house. This is the couch. This is the silverware, the pictures on the wall, clothes, your underwear, your toothbrush, everything that you have purchased that is inside that house, you want to make sure you cover it. Now, here's where another issue that gets into place is oftentimes the policies will cover personal property up to 50 to 75% of the home value. So if you have a $100,000 house, they may only cover $50,000 worth of values. If you have a $300,000, it may be $150,000. Friends, if you start pricing out having to replace all the things that you own in the average house, many times you blow through the limits of that personal belonging. So a little tip that I like to do, and I've actually had clients do this, and it's something I would highly recommend you do. I've done this. I recommend you do it. Is I want you to grab your phone, your video camera on your phone, walk into every room, your garage, your exterior, interior, open up every drawer, and just talk about what you see. So let's say you start off in the laundry room, you open up and say, I see a washer and dryer, and I have cabinets full of soap, and it looks like about 20 washcloths, and you just start talking. Yeah, it may take you a little time, but you want to archive that about once every 2-3 years. You want to record a video of it, because if your house were to burn down, like we've seen people in California, if your house were to blow off the foundation because of a hurricane, if you have a fire and you have to replace all your belongings, the insurance company is going to give you a check for the percentage of your coverage, or you've got to be able to have a policy that actually replaces what you had. Man, whenever I lost that truck and trailer, we had camping gear, we had tents, we had chairs, we had tree stands, we had a four-wheeler, and I started adding all these things up. I knew what was on the trailer. I knew what we had, and luckily I had a picture of it. Somehow, thank you, Jesus, I'd taken a picture of my dad, my brother, and I, and it just so happened that you could see just about everything I had. You could see the tent, you could see all my cooking gear, everything we had. Tree stands were all around the truck, and I could prove to the insurance company what my values were. And therefore, they didn't question it because I could prove it. So you want to make sure that your personal belongings area is covered properly. And then finally, you want to make sure that you have the right amount of liability protection. You may only have $100,000 or $300,000, but you may want to purchase $300,000 to $500,000 of liability protection. If you're operating your house if you're operating your business within your house, you may want to make sure that you have a small rider on your homeowner's policy to help you in the event of there's a business issue. So those are some things that it covers. Now, finally, as I wrap up this fun conversation of homeowners insurance, how do you purchase a policy? So we talked about the difference between an agent and a broker as I described them. It doesn't matter which way you want to go. Both of them are going to ask some basic questions. They're going to ask you, what's your house made of? So mine's a stick frame, so it's a frame built. There are places in the South where I've seen completely stone. There may be a veneer. So they're going to want to know what your house is made of. What's the exterior? What's the style house? They're going to ask you if it's a two-story, if it's a ranch, it's colonial, is it modern, is it contemporary, is it craftsman style? What style is your house? How many bathrooms and other rooms do you have? What's the roof material? One of the things that made me choose the company I chose for the first 5 years was we have a metal roof on our house, a black metal special roof that lasts 50 years. And we couldn't find an insurance company who would do full replacement on a metal roof. The one I found, I did that. So they want to know what type of roof. They're going to know if you have any other structures like a garden, a shed, etc. If you have a fireplace or a particular trim, special features, like we have arched windows in our house, and we have a lot of natural barn wood and a lot of old beams in our house. So we had to list all those things down. They're going to know if it was what's called a spec house, a track house, or a custom built home. They want to know all that, because once they go through all these different things, then they may just write it offhand, or they may send an inspector out to take pictures of it and give you a listed price from that broker or insurance agent. So how do you purchase a policy? You talk to your broker or insurance agent and just be prepared for those type of questions. Hey, tell me about the house. They may ask if you have a dog. Like we have a bunch of big dogs. We have one dog that she'll bite you. She'll bite you. We had to put beware dog signs on the house, on the property, beware dog. She's a little feisty German Shepherd. We have 2 German Shepherds, and I have a huge Mastiff that they're just fun dogs, but they're big. So we had to disclose that to the insurance company, and they added a little bit more premium to it. So we had to put markings out. Beware the dog. If you come in the property, you're going to have a couple of German Shepherds and a big Mastiff at you. And that's 600, 800 pounds of dog that could bite you. So we had to disclose it. If you have a trampoline, if you have a pool, those are the things they're going to ask you to disclose. So as you go through your home value, the biggest thing that I can enforce to you or try to get to you at this point is, just because you bought a good homeowner's policy from a decent insurance agent, it's time to review it more than likely. You don't set it back. I personally review my policies yearly. My agent is top notch. He calls me. I've asked him to do that. And every year we sit down and he and I go through my insurance policies, and I ask him all the different questions, and he walks me through it. So especially if you're in an area of the country where the property values have increased, go and talk with your agent and make sure you have the right coverage. That's one of the biggest holes I see, is they don't have the right amount of replacement value coverage on the house, or their personal property is not fully covered. So those are 2 big holes that I'm sure that maybe if you have a house, you might be thinking, man, Justin, I never thought about that. Maybe time to do a policy review. Hey guys, I say it every week. Life is hard. It is. Life is good, and life can be frustrating. It can be. Money doesn't have to be frustrating. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out and make it a great day.